Today, our economic survey has been tabled in the Parliament, and we are together to see what it tells us about our current economic performance and what our economic strategy is. Survey is expected to be a window to economic thinking, and it allows us to not only assess the current economic performance, it also gives us ideas about where we are likely to head, what kind of growth we are likely to achieve, and what is the expected quality of that growth. And it also helps us assess the effectiveness of various policies and the program or initiatives of the government. And current survey, to my mind, presents a far more realistic assessment of our economic situation in today's context as well as in the medium term. Earlier surveys sometimes were disappointing because they were not grounded in India's reality. We've done well. We know we've done well in terms of building road infrastructure, building digital infrastructure, and we managed inflation pretty well last year. And survey highlights this and also credits RBI, for example, for managing inflation through monetary policy initiatives. Coming to one of the most important aspects in the survey, which is what the expected growth. Survey mentions that we are expecting to grow at about 6.5% in the medium term. And when it says medium term, it's 2023 to 2030, which means that our GDP will double in about 11 years' time. And which also means that our per capita income will grow at a slower rate, which is 5.5, because population growth is about 1%. And per capita income doubling will take even longer. To me, I was a little disappointed to see that number because my own assessment or expectation is that India can grow at 7% plus without much struggle. I consider 7% to be our natural rate of growth. We'll discuss that towards the end of our conversation, why I believe that 7% is easily doable. Survey highlights the reasons why we've not done well in the past, and the most important reason it lists is excessive credit growth. In fact, it's highlighting that's primary reason why we didn't uh, grow during the last 10 years. Now it also mentions saying we've deleveraged. At the economy level, we deleveraged by about 30 percentage points, which means now banks are in a better position to lend, corporates are in a better position to borrow, so are the households. So, which means the economy now can mobilize resources, which is credit resources, through the banking system and accelerate growth. And that's one way of growing. And the survey also lists going forward, saying these are the four pillars for helping India enhance its productive potential. And four pillars are one, creating public goods, which is investing in economic and social infrastructure. And it mentions about growth in Government of India's capital expenditure. And then second factor it mentions trust-based governance, and it gives an example of how our GST collections have grown, as there is a trust between the government and the business, and it highlights the fact that compliance has been much better. Third factor survey list is agriculture productivity, which has been brought in by agriculture reforms. It doesn't discuss in detail the relationship between productivity and reforms, but it just mentions saying these reforms have helped us grow agriculture productivity. I would have expected them to uh, mention more specifically saying how it's enabled productivity. And then it mentions about private sector participation, which is growth in consumption as well as growth in investment in the private sector during the last few years and going forward. Right. So the four factors are creating public goods through government investment, then building a trust-based governance system, and improving agriculture productivity and improving private sector participation. In India, government contributes about 30% of the GDP, which means government expenditure at the state and the central level is about 30% of the GDP. Uh, During the last few years, we have run very high fiscal deficits, and now we are at the phase where consolidation or fiscal consolidation is taking place and will continue to take place. So, therefore, government is not likely to remain a major investor in the economy during the coming 2 to 3 years, and which means that private sector has to finance growth. And even when government has to borrow, it will have to borrow from households only, right? It can't borrow from anyone else. So therefore, what we need to focus on is saying how are our households going to provide capital either in form of equity or in form of debt to our private sector businesses as well as government. Survey doesn't discuss that. It doesn't discuss how our household earnings are expected to grow or how our savings are expected to grow, because it's the earnings and the savings which will help create risk capital in the economy and which is available to the business and the government for investment. On the other hand, it does highlight saying real wages in rural India have not been grown. So, which means rural India's ability to provide risk capital is low. We also know that the employment level and workforce participation in the urban context has also been low. Though employment is improving now, it's recovered and is expected to be at the same level in the pre-pandemic area. But our workforce participation and employment levels are still relatively low. So the question we have to ask is, how do we ensure that our household earnings grow and their savings therefore also grow? And this growth has to be in real earnings, not only in nominal earnings beating inflation, right? And the way to do that is obviously creating higher value adding work, which is higher value adding jobs in agriculture, higher value adding jobs in manufacturing, and higher value adding jobs or work in services. We've trying to do that in manufacturing. We're particularly keen that we become globally competitive. We become part of the global value chain, and the government has introduced, as you know, production-linked incentive scheme. I was hoping to see some more details there in the survey in terms of what the effectiveness of these production-linked incentive schemes is. Survey does mention that we've attracted investment of about 47,000 crores. Then employment generated through the scheme has been about 3 lakh people. Now the question all of us need to ask is saying, is it incremental or some part of it would have happened in any case? Effectiveness of a scheme is measured only in terms of increments and not in terms of absolute numbers which the scheme has generated. So I was a little sort of in a way disappointed saying we didn't see that being evaluated, because any production linked incentive scheme does run the risk of encouraging lazy manufacturing. And lazy manufacturing, which means that we would have anyway created those jobs or invested, but since we have provided incentive, those are being attributed to incentives. What I would like to see, maybe hopefully in the budget or later, is that can we introduce schemes which enhance productivity and value creation through innovation? Because then only we can become a globally competitive player in manufacturing or even in services. We can enhance our ability to grow. And this is one of the reasons why I was suggesting earlier in the conversation, saying India can grow at 7 or 8% or even more if we can direct our investments and our effort in driving productivity and value creation through innovation. Our index in the global innovation index, we are now 40, but that's not enough. We need to do much more in order to be competitive with large manufacturing powerhouses or large services powerhouses. And we don't have to be satisfied with being a bright spot when the world economy is not growing. We can be a bright spot even when the world economy is growing at a much faster rate. And I think that's feasible. And if we can provide, if the government can provide consistent support, And our businesses are focused on, as I said, growing productivity and value through innovation. Right? That's how I saw today's service. Thank you, and look forward to your comments on the site. Bye for now.